for joining. I'm sure we're gonna have more people joining us. Frank, thank you so much for being here tonight by Zoom. We're sorry you couldn't be here in person, but maybe someday. Yeah. So Frank is an instructor with the Cornell Master Beekeeper program. He is a certified master beekeeper. And his new book, Bee People and the Bugs They Love, hopefully you'll all get a copy of if you haven't ordered it already. I can't wait to read mine. And he's president of the Northeast New Jersey Beekeepers Association. Everyone, please welcome Frank Mortimer.
Here.
Hey, Frank, welcome.
Hey, thanks everybody. And yeah, it's for those that don't know, Bonnie and I met over a year ago when Bonnie and Gary and I were all at the Nevada State Beekeepers meeting. And if we didn't get this global pandemic, I would have been live at your meeting. And so I am. It's nice to see you all this way. I just wish it was in person as we originally had hoped. And so I'm gonna share my screen.
Yeah, before you move on, Frank, you're welcome anytime. So once everything is, we're back on board, come on out to California.
And I am going to take you guys up on that because I would love to come out there.
Good.
So thanks, Bonnie, for the nice introduction. So yeah, so this what my presentation today is going to be is from how did I go from just never being a beekeeper to master beekeeper to writing a book. And but before I begin, I want to tell you what beekeeping is like on the other coast out here in New Jersey. So New Jersey is actually the most densely populated state, and I live in the most densely populated county. So if you look at the map where it's bright red in the upper right corner, that's me. And sometimes beekeeping in Jersey is very Jersey. For those that were fans of The Sopranos, that was filmed and supposed to take place right where I am. And I'm happy to report that there are people that do resemble this out here. And but actually, Jersey's a great place to keep bees. We have some awesome nectar flows. That picture of me on the left is next to my best producing hive so it's from years ago, but that produced over 340 pounds. You know, the 240 that I took off all those white supers, and then I left them a full 10 frames of honey down below. The middle picture is kind of cool as I was catching a swarm, and in the background across the river, that's Manhattan. And it just, it was kind of special to be able to see the skyline of New York and get some bees in a box. But so how did I get into beekeeping? You know, we all have different stories, how we landed on it. And it's funny when people ask me, how did I get into it? You know, it's I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. I just always wanted to do it. I didn't know anybody that had bees. I never was around bees, but something just told me it would be fun. And then so there was the little free paper that lands in your driveway, and I picked it up and saw that there was a lecture on beekeeping at the library just one town over from me. So I show up. So from never knowing anybody that has bees and not really ever talking about it, I go into this room in the library and it's packed. And I'm like, holy cow, there's this many other people that are interested in beekeeping. And the number one thing that I learned at that meeting was that there was a local beekeeping club. And what surprised me, one, is that there was such a thing as a beekeeping club. And two, that there was enough people in northern New Jersey that would join and support a beekeeping club that it could meet monthly. So when I got in there, it was a pretty small club. Like we were lucky if we had 9 or 10 people show up at the monthly meetings, and they were all grumpy old men. I think the average age was about 400 before I started. I thought the meetings were really disorganized, and it was more of a social event, and they weren't really that helpful. And then, as I like to say, then the Cub Scout event that changed everything. So my son, who is now a senior in high school and will soon be going off to college, but back in the day, he was a little kid, a Cub Scout, and then they had the sleepover. But like me, and I'm sure all of you, when you were, if you were a scout, when you were camping was done outdoors, but apparently that's not the way it is anymore. So the camping trip was inside an aquarium. And so each den was assigned a different room. We were assigned the aquatic mammals room. And so when we picked out our spot to sleep, my son and I slept behind the otter exhibit. And as I was laying there on the concrete floor, there was no way I was going to sleep. Between sleeping on the concrete and just all the dust from the rug that people walk on. So as I'm laying there, I'm doing what all beekeepers do when we're not asleep. I started thinking about bees. And so as I'm laying there, I'm like, man, there's got to be a way to make the bee meetings better. And so I started putting together in my head this calendar of events, that map to when we do things, when you want to know mite treatments, extracting honey, what are some other products you can make. So as I'm laying there in my head, I'm visualizing this Microsoft Word template and how I would organize everything. And then so when I got out of that sleepover and got home, I wrote it all up. I emailed the people that I thought about that could give the presentations. And then I did all this on my own. Then I show up at the next meeting. I'm like, hey, guess what I did? And I wasn't sure how people were going to react. And they ended up reacting by electing me president of the club. And so my first moral of the story is that if you ever want to be elected a club officer, go sleep on a cement floor. And then when I became president, like I said, we only had less than 30 paid members, and only 9 or 10 would show up at the meetings. And I had a lot of ideas. And the new vice president of the club, we wanted to do all this stuff to make it better. But the two things you need for a club is we needed more money and we needed members. And so the answer was bee talks for me. It was again, being in such a crowded area in New Jersey, people were always looking for bee speakers. And so I was accepting any and all talks. And then all the money I raised, I would give to the club. Like I'd have them write the checks directly to the club as a way for us to raise money. And it was also good because then it raised awareness for beekeeping. And again, I'm in a very suburban and in sometimes more urban areas in Jersey. So it was great to explain to people that you can still have bees living in that kind of area. And then, but what was happening was that each talk I did, that I got a little bit better at how to say things. It's like think about when you were first explaining what is a hive, what's inside a hive to somebody, then after doing that enough times, I really was able to polish it. And also from doing these talks, a lot of times if I didn't know something, I'd have to look it up. So my next talk was better. And the end result was that all these talks I was doing actually made me a better beekeeper because I really learned all the facts. But then after doing these, like literally over 125 talks, I just asked myself, I said, man, why do I keep doing this? How many times can I say the same thing? And why do people ask the same questions? And, but I also said to myself, I get to tell my goofy jokes and people laugh at it. They like how I explain things, so maybe there's some more stuff I can do here. But what also popped in my head time and time again was that old joke, which I think is actually true. You ask 3 beekeepers a question and you're going to get 4 answers. And so what I was finding, especially in my club, was that, there's all these different opinions of what to do. There's, the people that, they've watched it on YouTube, so they're the expert, even though what they think really doesn't map to common sense. So there's all this bad advice out there. And, and I just felt like I needed to prove that I knew what I was talking about. What I realized I needed is I wanted to be certified as a master beekeeper. And so the Cornell program had just come online and I just wanted to sign up for that first class. And the funny story is that I can tell you exactly when the first day that the registration opened, and it was February 8th, 2017. And I know that because my wife was literally in labor at the hospital, and in the room in the early labor, I'm like, hey, today is when I can sign up for that master beekeeping program. And thankfully for the euphoria that comes with early labor, she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I do think if I had waited beyond that, I never would have done it, because there would have been a lot of diapers and other stuff that I had to change. So I signed up. And for any master beekeepers that are on, I am going to share the secret. And for those that have always wondered, what is the true test of a master beekeeper? Well, it's being able to drink your coffee through your veil. No, but really the Cornell program is divided into 4 separate courses, and it takes 15 months to complete. And at the end of each of these courses, there's a different final project you have to do. And for the first program, the final project was that you had to do an outline for a speech to non-beekeepers. And I had, literally done over 125 plus at this time. So I was like, boop, I was able to just get it out exactly how it should be. And I was like, man, that was easy. And then I got a tremendous amount of positive feedback from my instructor on it. And it really was a turning point for me by doing that, because then I took that outline and then I just filled it out into an article for Bee Culture and sent it in. And then Kim Flodham wrote me back and he said, there's a lot of good information in here. And he published it. And then I was so excited. So I wrote 2 more articles that year, and Kim published those as well. So I went from never publishing anything to having 3 articles published in less than a year. And what really got me excited was that the feedback I was getting on my stories was that people really liked them, and it was making them laugh. And then so I just kept writing articles for Bee Culture and some other places as well, and got a lot of feedback. So then that's when I decided that I was going to write my biggest and best story ever. So here's some of the reviews that I've received on Bee Culture. Tom Seeley said, if the world of beekeepers has a top ambassador, it's Frank the Bee Man. And the New York Times reviewed it in the summer, and they said it's an achievement to convey so much knowledge, and that the book is sure to swell the ranks of the world's beekeepers. And closer to you guys, the San Francisco Book Review, reviewer said this ranks among the best written books I've ever reviewed. Bee people are a weird and fascinating lot, and the author delves deeply enough into their eccentricities to make for a fascinating read. Kim Flodham said, talks about that, about all the firsts that you go through in beekeeping, and that, that read Mortimer, he gets it right. And Bee Nerd Alert, you'll meet some of the best people in the world, beekeepers. And what's cool is in the book, I have these, I call them Bee Nerd Alerts. And what those are, a little boxed material that goes a little deeper into the content. So the book itself is more for a general read, but then for people that want to have that extra information, it's there. And those that don't want it can just skip over it. And then Tammy Potter Horn, who's the author of Bees in America. And if you don't have her book, get it. I love her book. It talks about from the bees, how they were brought over from the European colonists all the way to the current time, and how bees really impacted how our country came to be. So it's a great book. And what I like that she says here is that Mortimer has conjured the eccentric beekeepers from every corner of the world, including yours. And now this is not a beekeeper, but if you watch Netflix, you might know the name Harlan Coben. He has a new book out as well called Win, but he's a New York Times #1 best-selling author. And what I like most about his is that he was able to get all the bee puns and dad jokes into his quote, which is that it's getting a lot of buzz, and be smart and read this unbelievable look at quirky world of beekeeping. And so, people, especially beekeepers, are like, well, what makes your book so special? And the thing is this is not a how-to book. It's a laugh at my mistakes book. And so I'm going to read you one of my favorite stories that I like to tell. real quick. And it goes, most of my monumental mistakes usually began with me saying, let me just do this real fast. Whenever I think I'll just move at a faster speed or that I'll get something done zippity quick, is when the bees remind me that it's always a better idea for me to take my time and never ever rush. The first time my soon to be wife experienced her first bee sting was when I said, I need to feed one of my hives some more sugar syrup. I'll be quick. Let me just do it real fast. Then, because I was focused on working fast instead of watching what I was doing, I made a series of mistakes that led to my surprise that she still married me, soon to be wife's, getting stung on her right thigh. Since I was going to be moving fast, I thought I'd skip lighting the smoker, which led to alarm pheromones getting released and putting the bees on high alert. Next, I haphazardly laid the inner cover, which was covered in a fair number of bees, against the side of the hive. And when I went to pour the syrup into the hive top feeder, I bumped into the inner cover, causing it to topple over and land on my never screamed, but couldn't believe what I had just done, surprised that she still married me, soon to be wife's feet. Once the inner cover hit the ground, the beast became airborne, and the one that landed on my bride's thigh decided that she'd had enough. Thankfully, once my so much smarter than me, never screamed, but couldn't believe what I had done, surprised that she still married me, soon to be wife, realized that she had been stung. She immediately walked away from the hive, went back to the car, and waited until I was done. Now, whenever she accompanies me to the hives, the first thing she always asks is, did you light your smoker? And so, and that's the whole point. I mean, it's all these stories that we've told that are funny, and it just focuses on us, the people that would willingly choose or willingly want to hang around with stinging insects. And I guess the other thing is, like, I'm sure your club is like ours, and and everyone's swapping stories, and then all of a sudden someone will say, man, with all the crazy stuff us beekeepers do, somebody should write a book. And that's exactly what this book is. It just really captures what it's like to love the honey loving bug. And to me, what's so special is, I mean, stop and think about this for a second. I'm in New Jersey. I'm on the other side of the country, and here we all are on a Zoom meeting talking about a bug. And that's what's so great, is we have this international, like, it's almost like a fraternal order of us that just love to do this. And so and that extends like to Europe as well. And my wife is from Sweden, and then so on one of the trips over there, I did what I'm sure most people do when they go to Europe. I found the local beekeeping club, emailed them ahead of time so I could hang out with them when we went over there. And which my in-laws thought was a little bit interesting. But it was funny that the president of the club, whose English was significantly better than my Swedish, because I can't speak Swedish at all. And so we were kind of joking and stuff. And then he looks over at me, he goes, us beekeepers, we're a crazy bunch. And I'm like, wow, it is international. So, and then just real quickly, these pictures, this, the hive that they have here is actually, and I was telling Bonnie this before we started, one of the main things that I found interesting over there is how many different sized hives they have. They have like literally like 5 or 6 different hives you can choose from. This one is called the Svea hive, and it's probably their oldest sized, and the frames are massive on it. And the top pops up, and then you can get into it below. So it's kind of cool. And then the book, that's their Swedish beekeeping book. And then because it's such a cold environment, they all sell honey creamed. Like, no one really sells liquid honey there at all. And that's what I think is cool. Like, I on this slide here, one of those pictures is me in Sweden, the other one is in New Jersey, and we're doing the same thing. And what I take such pride in being a beekeeper is that the bees come first. It's by being a beekeeper, you can make a friend, and it doesn't matter where you're from, what if you speak or the same language or not, because you're speaking bees, and that's all that matters. And so, why are there so many characters in beekeeping? It's like, if you had to try to describe us, you'd say, hey, we tend to be individuals, nonconformists, where a lot of people think we're memorable. Most other people that aren't beekeepers would just say we're weird. And we need to accept that, because how else can you explain that we willingly seek to be around a bug that will sting us? And so now I want to read for you a little blurb about my first state bee meeting. I arrived at the meeting bright and early so I would be in line for the 7:30 a.m. check-in. The meeting was being held at Rutgers University's Eco Complex, which is on a Rutgers satellite campus in Bordertown, New Jersey, and focuses on the environment and agriculture. Everyone I met was super friendly, and it was easy to see that most of these people had known one another for years. I didn't see anyone from our club, so I grabbed a coffee and a bagel and just walked around the atrium before heading into the meeting room. Within 30 minutes, the auditorium was full and every one of the 150 seats was taken. I was amazed to think that all these people had woken up at the crack of dawn on a Saturday morning just to listen to someone talk about bees. I had found my tribe. I looked around the room and thought of the children's book, Go Dog Go. Only instead of big dogs, little dogs, red dogs, blue dogs, all at the dog party, this was tall beekeepers, short beekeepers, male beekeepers, female beekeepers, fat beekeepers, skinny beekeepers, old beekeepers, young beekeepers, all at the Bee Me team. There was just as many women as men and just as many couples as singles. The more I scanned the room, the more I realized that there was not one type of person who kept bees. Beekeepers come in all sizes, shapes, genders, colors, and ages. The only thing anyone seemed to have in common was that they kept bees. And I think that's what's really cool is that, it really doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, or what you think. As long as you like bees, you can be in our club. But even with that said, there are some typical characters that I think exist in every club, no matter where the club is located. And I'm going to show you some examples. And as I go through this, you're going to say, yep, I know that guy. And my favorite thing about this is that these characters don't even realize that they're a type. So the first one is the spaceman. You know this guy. He's the one that likes to play dress up. That's why he got into beekeeping. He'll protect himself from head to toe. He's duct taping his gloves to his suit. He's duct taping his pants to his boots. And that way he can be sure that he's safe from bees, plutonium, and zero gravity. Next is the show off. This is the beekeeper that likes to perform for a crowd. They're into keeping bees for the shock value, and you're going to hear him talking more about stings than about bees. Then, of course, there's the new age know-it-all. This is the person that's like, forget science. They think they know better, and they're going to manage their bees with good vibes, unicorns, and feng shui. They think they truly understand the bee's needs, and they're going to handle it with a nice, happy vibe. And finally, there's my hero, who I know he's spoken to your club, Dr. Michael Smith from the Cornell University, who stung himself repeatedly in 25 different locations on his body. And when we say on his body, we mean all over his body to determine where it hurt the most. And even though he did sting his nether region, as we'll call it, for those that don't know, he said that by far the most painful place to be stung was inside the nose. But only a beekeeper would do that. And that's because our normal is different than other people's normal. And with that comes great responsibility. But it is true that you have to think of how we are different from other people. So the next little reading I want to do is when I got my very first bees and started into this whole journey. Instead of being part of installing my first hive in my backyard, my official start to beekeeping came via a series of text messages from Sarah, my son's babysitter. Days before, when I told Sarah that I was going to become a beekeeper and start keeping bees in the backyard, I got the look, something that I would see time and time again when I told someone about my hobby. The look is a facial expression that, regardless of one's native language, is understood to mean, are you kidding me? Sarah was overly dramatic about everything from breakfast foods to coordinating her outfits with my son's crayons. So the news about getting bees really sent her over the edge. As I sat stuck on a train somewhere outside of Secaucus, the text from Sarah went something like this. There's a bright yellow car in the driveway and two strange men are in the backyard. Oh, those must be the guys from the bee club bringing me my bees. Eek! Are all the windows closed? Can bees fly down the chimney? Ack! What should I do? Relax. You have nothing to worry about. Nothing is going to happen. Now there's a huge cloud of smoke in the backyard. They're burning down the yard. No, they lit their smoker. You use smoke to keep bees calm. What kind of smoke makes bees mellow? What are they burning in there? Probably pine needles. Oh. Now they're carrying a box with a shiny silver top through the backyard. The fat guy is yelling at the old guy saying he's using too much smoke. The old guy is telling him to relax and he's puffing even more smoke at him. The old guy just pulled the screen off the box and he's puffing even more smoke. The fat guy is dancing around, slapping himself. He's yelling about waiting till he wasn't standing in front of the hive. Now the fat guy is running through the backyard screaming, I'm hit, got my ear, got my ear. The old guy is laughing. Now they're both leaving the backyard. Someone's ringing the doorbell. It's them. They told me to tell you that the beehive is in and they're leaving. I can see the stinger in the fat guy's ear. Ew. And about the same time Sarah was hyperventilating on the living room floor, I received a single text from the badger. Bees are in your backyard. It was a piece of cake and everything went smoothly. Tomorrow, tilt your hive so it's slanted forward. Good luck. At last, I had a hive in my backyard and it made me smile. It was something I wanted for so long, and now I could finally call myself a beekeeper. And that's true, a good example of how, we're like the beekeepers and most non-beekeepers are like Sarah, the babysitter. And on this slide, I think that for me, I really encounter that whenever I'm catching swarms. And the picture of me on the left is when I was getting a swarm that landed in my downtown of my village where I live. And then what was funny was that when I got home, I saw on the town's Facebook page that people had taken pictures and were commenting on it. And that's what's below the picture. And the one guy's like, that dude's crazy. He throws them in his trunk like it's nothing. So I had to respond and say, yeah, my wife would agree with you. But, and then the middle picture is, like all of us, I get bees in my car just from going to my different bee yards. And so I snapped that picture and I have a close up of the bee on my finger that I use to start my bee talks. And I like to tell people, hey, if you don't bother bees, they're not going to bother you. And it's funny that then someone will say, oh, where'd you take that picture? And I'm like, oh, it was in my car. And then the look I describe in my book is the look I see like, are you effing kidding me? Because most people that aren't beekeepers, if there were bees in their car, they're going to not even hit the brake. They're just going to jump out and roll. And the picture of me and the policeman was another time I caught a swarm, and he was just for being an armed and big man, he was just shocked when I put the bees in my car, and he did kind of like this Three Stooges mode where he like rubbed his hands over his face when he saw me do it. But I think that with what I like about hanging out with beekeepers is that, I think that they're great friends. I've met some of my best friends since I've started keeping bees and had, just really developed strong relationships. And again, like, Bonnie and I met over a year ago and we talked today and it's like we're old friends. And that's something I think that is great about beekeepers. And it's funny how, we could talk about bees 365 days out of the year. And it's funny, I have holidays on here, and it's funny, only the first time that I got a call from a beekeeper on a holiday was I surprised. And after that, it's like if the phone rings, it probably is one of my fellow beekeepers. And the other thing is I've thought about it, it's like at the heart of what we do is we're nurturing this organism, right? But it's not like a dog or a cat that's going to give you love back. We're nurturing tens of thousands of bugs that would sting us if they could. And I think to do that, there has to be some nurturing gene along with it, because why else would we do it? And these are two of my favorite cartoons for it. The first one is, he likes to bring them inside for the winter. And then the other one from the New Yorker is the beekeeper says to his wife, oh, but it's fine for you to grade papers. And but it's because beekeepers are nurturing people why I think we make good friends. And it's also why I love involving my whole family in beekeeping. These are my three kids, and my girls have both been out in the bee yard since they were 3 years old. They're now 6 and 4. But I just love that they have no fear. And then my son, who's now 17, so he's a little too cool to hang out with dad. But when he was younger, he used to come out as well. Um, but yeah, it's beekeeping is how I say it defines my family, and it's something that we do together, and it's what keeps us close. I joke to non-beekeepers, hey, you guys might go throw a baseball around in your backyard, but we're just my family. We tend to do stuff with honey and bees. And that's why I'm proud to call myself a bee people, is because of how much I love my bee people. So thank you very much. And now, any questions or comments?
I wonder what he does besides writing and talking about bees.
What's your question? I'm sorry.
What else have you done for a career other than writing about bees and giving talks about bees?
So beekeeping is just my hobby / my obsession.
Right.
So I worked with college textbooks for a long time, and now I'm in marketing.
That's why you're such a good writer.
Thank you.
I might just comment that our club, when I started about, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, we had 12 members, and we would have meetings with no program and maybe 4 or 5 people would show up. And over the years, we're now, each year we get around 350 members, and we have 700 or 800 ex-members, many of which are still keeping bees. And this is just for our small Marin County. So our bee club has grown like yours over the years.
That's fantastic. Then you know exactly what I'm saying. Like when you're starting off with just that 15 people, you do anything and everything to grow the club, And I talk about that in some of the later chapters of how it was really a partnership with me and the vice president, just brainstorming and trying new ideas to really grow the club.
Have you noticed a lot of new members from the pandemic? I mean, seems like we've lost a lot of people, just didn't renew this year, but there's many, many new people coming into the club.
That's great. We have not experienced that. So our membership, we've actually seen kind of go down a little bit this past year. So that I hope that it's going to pick back up after things get back to normal. I see there's a question in the chat. How did becoming a master beekeeper change your beekeeping practices? So the Cornell program, and every master beekeeping program has a little different emphasis. The Cornell one is really to base what your beekeeping on science to make your decisions. So I would say that it helped me organize. Like I've always been big about treating for mites, but from taking the program, I now have a mite treatment calendar. So I map it out for the year of when I'm going to do what. Also about doing my alcohol washes for my mites. And then third is that I used to really be skeptical of oxalic acid, but from going through the course and then doing more follow-up research, I'm now a really big proponent of oxalic acid.
Fume or drip?
I like fume. But it's funny. I wrote an article for Bee Culture about it called "My Apology to Oxalic Acid," because when I first heard about it, that's when it was still illegal here in the U.S. And then I happened to go to a natural beekeeping class where I heard about it, and some of the other crazy stuff I was hearing really had me on high alert. So when I heard about oxalic acid in conjunction with that other stuff, I'm like, this stuff sounds nuts. So it took me a while to get over that and realize that it really is a great thing to have in your mite treatment bag.
And do you use formic as well?
I do not like formic. That's a personal choice because I think that formic is too hard on the queens. So no, I would rather do multiple vapors in the hive if there's brood present. So, but I like oxalic, and then of course Apivar is my big treatment of choice too. I see another. Go ahead,
Are there
Bonnie.
are there many beekeepers out in your area? I mean, um, that are experimenting or using the treatment with oxalic, like not the fume or the drip, but with what Randy and the Argentinian beekeepers are doing with the glycerin.
There was a few beekeepers out here, including a commercial beekeeper who runs between 8 and 10,000 hives, and then so he did an experiment with a few hundred in the glycerin, and it didn't work. So our summers are very humid, so I think that it seems like the shop towel only works in some instances, and just Jersey's not one where it's going to ever catch on. And then I see a question about treatment-free beekeepers. So the thing is, like, because New Jersey, especially where I am, is such a heavily, densely populated area, I always said to our members that if you overlay all of our hives, and since bees travel 3 miles, that everyone's bees touches everyone else's. So for us, it's more important as a community to have good mite treatment things, because if you get a few people that aren't treating, then that can really lead to mite bombs, and it can impact the entire community. So I really lean towards heavy treatment of mites because of the damage that they're doing. And one of the Cornell studies has shown that, if you look at how the percentage of mites that colonies could handle in the 90s was a lot higher than it is now, and it's because mites are a vector for diseases, and all those diseases are what's really, think of the pandemic we're in, right? So it's not just the mite, but it's all these diseases they're vectoring that are really killing off the hives like they are. So, and we brought in Jamie Ellis to talk last month or the month before, and from University of Florida, and he had a great line. I thought he said, once you take a colony of bees out of a natural setting like a tree and put it into a man-made box, how can it be natural beekeeping at that point?
Frank, I'm curious, where are the beekeepers? How are the beekeepers in your club and area sourcing their bees? Like, where are they getting them from?
So we have one main dealer here in New Jersey. We have the largest commercial beekeeper in New Jersey. He has property in North Carolina, and then in Jersey, and then also in upstate New York. So he actually brings his bees to almonds as well. When he gets back from almonds, he starts producing nukes in North Carolina, and then we'll bring them up here to Jersey in April. So we primarily get them from him. I mean, there's some smaller dealers as well, but Styles Honey is where we get most of them from. And if anybody's ever seen, you ever seen that Mike's Hot Honey on the shelves? So so that's actually made in New Jersey by my friend. He packs it. His name is not Mike, but that company actually hires him to pack all that honey. And it's amazing how well that stuff sells. He had to get a whole other building just to produce it, and it's just wild to go there, because it just smells. Because he grinds up the peppers, and then he heats up the peppers and then has it immersed in the honey. Then he has to strain it so that all the pepper stay behind and just the honey comes through. But it really gives that heat. So it's pretty cool. For me, it's wild because when he measures how much honey he gets by the 55-gallon drum, And so you figure that's like 650 plus pounds per drum. And he averages about 1,000 drums a year. And it's just wild. Like I asked him, and I've helped him down there, and just to go from me, and I have 16 colonies that I have over 3 bee yards. So I always joke with him to say that, like, I'm building these little Lego models and he's building big cities, because it's just such a different scale. And so when I've helped him in his honey house, it's, he takes his drums from the heater, so he can make sure it's not crystallized, and then you dump these drums into a waiting vat that then pumps it to the pumping station. But like to dump 650 pounds of warm honey is crazy, which I've done, but it's just such a wild feeling. And the whole place smells, it's filled with honey. So I said it's like a cross, and it's hot. So it's a cross between like a sauna and a baked ham. Are bees attracted to pot plants? I don't know about that. You guys are in California. You should know more about that than me.
Hey, speaking of California, so Frank, what are you guys doing with your bees right now? Like, I know I just got queen cells into hives today. I know Jennifer's been getting queen cells into hives. Like, where are you guys at right now?
So things have not started blooming here. Like, so what we're doing is that we're just checking to make sure they have food. And then, for the hives that are low, we're still giving them blocks of candy, because it's still too cold to put any syrup on. So we're still getting down below freezing here on some nights. But I think within the next week or so is when things are going to start really changing.
Just so you know, it was 85 today here in Marin County.
Thank you very much.
And everything's in bloom. It is just bursting everywhere.
That's awesome. Well, and to the question, if you feed, is it really honey? I don't have any supers on, so the feed is just to keep the bees alive. And yeah, if you have a feeder on while you have honey supers that you're going to take off, that's not honey. But right now, everyone's supers in New Jersey are in their garage.
Just FYI, we're swarming like crazy for the last 9 days, and our hills will brown up in about 8 weeks, and then our comb building will be done for the season. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, our season runs from like tax day till about mid-July. And then in some areas of Jersey, they'll get a second bloom in September. And that's Japanese knotweed. Do you guys get that out there? It's an invasive species.
We don't get Japanese knotweed. We have a native plant, coyote bush, baccharis, which is actually a great fall season plant, native season plant for our bees.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't get the Japanese knotweed, but like I said, a lot of beekeepers do. And I personally don't even like the taste of it. Some people do, but I do like the color. It's like this real reddish chestnut. So it's a very distinct looking honey. That's kind of cool. But again, it's an invasive species, the plan is, but it's at least good for around here. The positive of it is it gives bees something to feed on if they can get it, so they can at least stock up.
Which is probably why it's so invasive, because the European honeybees are feeding on it.
Yes,
a lot of our invasive plants here are the ones that are blooming during our summer dearth, our Mediterranean climate dearth, and they're non-native plants. And during that time of year, it's the only thing that the non-native honeybees can feed on. So.
Gotcha. There was a question about why did I let my hive go that high? Those were all honey supers, and part of it was I just wanted to see how high it would go. So I had like I was putting supers with foundation only in between supers that had already been drawn out, and I'm like, I'm just gonna see what happens. And then bam, I'm not kidding, like in a week they had drawn it out and filled it, and I just was like, I just got to see how high this will go. So it was crazy. I don't put my hives that high anymore. So what I found right now that I got honey last year out of 14 colonies. And then the year before, gosh, I want to say it was like 10-ish that I got, but the average over the last 2 years per hive of honey I was getting was 130 pounds of honey per hive. And so what the trick is that I found, like I used to think, oh, if I just keep putting more supers on, I actually extract twice. So I'll extract, so I put them on in mid to late April. I'll extract in June, and then I'll do it 1 yard at a time. So I extract and can get the supers back on within 24 hours. So the bees I don't think really realize they're gone. And then I'll extract the second time at the end of July. And since I've started doing that double extraction like that, it literally has doubled my honey.
Mhm.
And what plants account for your honey flow there?
So because we're in suburbia, so we think it mostly comes from trees. So we have a lot of black locust and linden trees. And then that's the early honey, especially because it's really light. And then linden can almost have a sort of citrusy sort of flavor to it, just like a hint of it, which is interesting because like in France, they refer to it as the lime tree and not the citrus lime, but they call it lime. But yeah, it's funny because like, if you think about it, like if it takes approximately 2 million flowers to make 1 pound of honey, and then as you drive around suburbia, what's the only plant that is in that great a number that it could support that amount of beekeepers in its trees?
Mhm. So after July, you're stocking up for the winter?
Yeah, we hit a pretty big dearth from in July and August, and so like that's when we really have to be careful with robbing because you have these really powerful hives, and so and if there's nothing blooming, they can get crazy.
Mhm.
Do you use plastic frames? No, I prefer to use wax foundation. You know, there's people who love plastic, but to me, I just think that the bees build out better on wax, so I prefer the wax foundation.
Do you have wired wax?
Yes.
Because otherwise extraction can be an issue.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's absolutely have to wire, and it's funny, like when you first start when you first start in beekeeping and you don't really realize how much force goes on the comb year after year that you might start off not reinforcing it with the cross wires, but man, now I put a lot of that on. So how many boxes do your hives occupy in a Jersey winter? So I run 2 deeps, so I think that's what the majority of folks do here. And that's, we say that you need anywhere from 60 to 80 pounds of honey for the bees to make it through winter. So, cause like this year, especially, it broke all the Jersey records. Our February had more snow than the state has had in over 127 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here.
We're going in the opposite direction here. Not a lot of rain.
Yeah, I'm hoping that because there's so much that will water in the ground that hopefully we'll get a lot of good early blooms here.
Right.
You should. Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Yes, I wanted to know, Frank, are your bees Italians, Carniolan? What are they?
They're mutts. That
Best kind.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny, Gary, because I've tried some more purebred bees at different times. And I talk about this a little in my books. Like for a while, I was trying Cordovans because I really like those light color Italians. The blondes, as I joke in my book, my wife being Swedish blonde, you know, I allowed to do that in the beekeeping world. But those Cordovan queens were from California. I can't remember what apiary, but they definitely were from California. So I've tried those. I've tried carnies, and I've also tried buckfast. That there's a buckfast breeder in Canada, in Ontario, and I had a work trip up there. And I, so what did I do on my day off? I went and found a beekeeper, and the buckfast were pretty cool. I will say that. So we shipped some queens in from him, and they were interesting. But to me, you know, I think by the, you know, you get one swarm, then all of a sudden it's a mutt. So now I just more choose bees based on how well they make honey, and if they're not producing that, then I'll switch the queens out.
So Frank, are the people in your community buying packages, nukes, or how are they increasing their?
Nukes is what we really push in our club, and that's what the commercial beekeeper builds down in North Carolina is the nukes. But you know, if we only have from April to July, you know, you need that build up to be fast. So that's why I think that the nukes is a much better way to go. I mean, there are some people that will still get packages that they get shipped in from Georgia, you know, or that they'll bring up together from Georgia. But I in my club, it's nukes.
So I take it you really don't have any local suppliers?
For nukes, not in a big enough quantity to support our club. Like there's a few smaller beekeepers that have, and by smaller I mean they may sell like 25 to 50 nukes, but like the commercial guy, he does like about 1,000 nukes a year.
Right. But do you find that local bees that are bred locally do better than bees that are coming out of other states?
Um, I the There is a few local queen breeders in New Jersey, and like the one was the beekeeper who did the carniolans, and that's why I tried carnies for a while, and just I thought, you know, the carnies were fine, but they like I wouldn't be dedicated to them. But I will say for myself, you know, like when I'm able to do splits and then create nukes that can overwinter or put them in the hives, that I think that those bees do the best because they're, you know, they are locally bred and overwintered. So if
Right.
in my own operation, that's what I prefer.
Yep. So do we.
That's good. Let's see. The best way to get my book, I say stay local and support local. There's an event in a couple of weeks at Copperfields, which I think has like 7 or 8 stores around you guys. So I would ask that you buy it from Copperfields if you can.
Easy. We got one in my town.
Yeah, we got one here in Napa.
Nice. Yeah, they and Bonnie and I are doing an event on Earth Day. That'll be a virtual thing like this. So it'll be more of a geared to the non-beekeeper, but just talking a little bit more about the book. And let's see, another question here. Does being a master beekeeper give you any special permissions? Is it a certification to indicate your level of knowledge? Yeah, it's mostly to indicate level of knowledge. Now, I will say that in New Jersey, we have beekeeping laws at the state level to support and encourage backyard beekeeping. And so it's interesting because Jersey is what's called a home rule state. So most of the time municipalities can set their own laws, but so there's very few where the state supersedes those. But that's why the beekeeping law was done at the state level, because as the suburban beekeeping population was increasing, a lot of towns were getting complaints, and since they didn't know beekeeping, they were banning it. So we were seeing this slow banning process going on, so that I could give a whole presentation on this too, but that's why we moved at the state level to get the law passed and then the regulations to do it. So within those regulations, it says if you are a master beekeeper, you are there's certain things that you can do that others can't if you don't have that certification. That was a long answer to a short question, so I'm sorry. But I think, like, to me, the main thing about becoming a master beekeeper is that when you hit, I'll back up a little bit. What I love about beekeeping is that there's two sides of it. There's the practical side, which is it gets you off your couch and you go into your hives. And then there's the nerd side, that's the intellectual side. And what I love is that on the intellectual side, you can keep going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole of research and knowledge about bees. And no matter how much you've read or how smart you are, there's always more to learn. And so for me, getting the master beekeeping certificate was just another way to learn and synthesize that material and then apply it back to my practical beekeeping. Anybody else have any questions? Let's see.
What are you ready to go to bed, Frank?
I pumped down the coffee before this, so I'm going to be wired for a while, so I could keep going. And that's like, speaking of stuff, like, did you ever read that study that bees prefer flowers that have caffeine in it to flowers that don't have caffeine?
Well, don't we all?
Yeah.
Spoken like a true bee nerd.
Yeah. And that's when I said, bees are my spirit animal if they like caffeine as much as I do.
Any more questions for Frank? And it doesn't have to be, just general info about your bees. Lots going on right now. Swarming's going crazy. Let's put his Cornell master beekeeper to the test. Yeah.
Could I explain a scenario that puzzled me? Is that we have time for that?
Sure.
Yeah. Just quite recently, I was, I had a nuke and a hive very close to it, and I was the nuke had a queen in it, and the hive, the other one did. I was gonna basically combine them, and so I had the nucleus. I was looking at the frames, and I got the queen. Actually, I was looking for the queen, and to my, I was kind of mystified that I couldn't find her immediately. My wife, Susan, found her actually on the inside cover. And so I picked her up and put her on a frame of her own brood that I was going to move to this other colony that needed a queen. And
which was the donor for the nuke.
Which was the original donor for the nuke. At the same time, I found some supersedure cells in that nuke. So I put that frame in another, box, like a super box, just to kind of keep it organized. And Susan immediately saw that they were attacking her. That queen got bald on a frame of her own brood. And the only thing I could think of was they were already going through the supersedure. So I kind of grabbed her because they were balling her. And this was like a botched combine because it's a whole different story, but I ended up losing her. She flew and she ended up, I saw her on the ground later, she got killed. But has anyone ever heard of a queen getting bald on a frame of her own brood? And there were supersedure cells. So the only thing I think of, they were in the process of already replacing her.
Well, if there are supersedure cells,
does that make sense what I just said? Because they were. I had to go in and rescue her. She was getting killed, and I thought it was I was about to move that frame of brood with the queen, and I was going to move with another frame of brood to another colony to give it a queen. And I thought it was safe to move like 2 or 3 frames of brood with a queen to a colony. I didn't even get that far because they started balling her on her own frame of brood.
If you saw the cells, is there a chance that it was a virgin queen?
We don't think so.
Let me think about that.
Well, and
No,
I would also,
I mean, no, because I don't think so, because I mean, no, I mean, she was, kind of fertile looking and swollen, and she didn't look like a virgin queen. And the cells were fairly recent. They weren't yet capped. They were like week-old queen cells.
by the same token, whenever you're going to move a queen, even though it's on her own brood, into a foreign colony, I find it's a good idea to you put a queen cage, not like a 4x6 cage around her,
Right.
with her own brood.
Mm-hmm.
And as they emerge, she's in that little cage and everybody gets used to her. Then you go and take the cage out and you won't have that problem.
Yeah, and I would definitely, I get that. I didn't even get that far though. They started balling her really before she got moved to the other colony.
Well, what's interesting.
While she was still in the nuke?
Yeah, I mean, well, in another empty nuke box right next to it. I never put her into the receiving colony. She just got balled on just a single frame of her own brood.
Well, what's interesting though is you found her on the inner cover.
Yeah, that was interesting too, and thanks to Susan for that. I was about to give up.
So maybe, I mean, so if she's up on the cover, they either chased her up there.
That's what I was thinking, that they were already getting rid of her. That's what I want to kind of throw out there. That's what I thought, which was why they were already replacing her. Anyway, I had never experienced it, and needless to say, I did not make that combination. I now have the nuke queenless, and the other one is also queenless. But yeah, I was perplexed.
Yeah.
A lot of drama in the hive.
Yeah. I mean, then there was, then they were kind of, both colonies were open. They started fighting each other, and but it would probably be a good chapter in your book.
Yeah.
Volume 2.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pieces of equipment is the Dedant Queen Hotel, and it's like the size of a deep, and it can be divided into 4, so you can do 2 frame colonies. So like if I go in a hive and I, like you said, I see or swarm cells, then what I'll do is I'll find my old queen and I'll move her and a frame of brood into this hotel, and then I'll put another frame in there, and then I'm done, because then the original hive thinks it swarmed because their queen is gone and I didn't lose any bees other than the ones I took over there. So I love that thing. So it's the Dedant Queen Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah.
And I saw a question, what is balling? Balling is how the bees kill the queen, and they'll literally jump on top of it like a Fred Flintstone sort of pile up on a football field.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm just answering the
I found
question.
that queen. She was in my hand, and she actually, kind of escaped. And then I found her later on the ground, being, there was a clump of bees, and she was kind of
Decapitated.
Yeah. I just found her abdomen. I mean, it was clearly an abdomen of a queen.
It was a mafia hit, so they were Italian.
Yeah. Actually, they were mutts, but they were, with some Italian.
Well, this is great. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or anything else?
Thank you, Frank. Really loved your talk and can't wait to read your book too. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. And my website is frankthebeeman.com, and it has a lot of this stuff and pictures and all that.
Come out and see us.
Frank, and hey, we look forward to having you out here in person.
Yes, I look forward to coming out there. Let's see, Jersey or Northern California. I'll be happy to come out.
Yeah, we look forward to that. We look forward to that return to normalcy. Having you out there. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight and staying up late.
You're welcome. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.